Hey friends, it has been said that politics is downstream of culture, which simply means if we just focus on legislation and we don't focus on the institutions that shape culture, we're going to be playing a very short-sighted game. One of the things that President Trump is doing is he understands this policy. He understands this principle. And so we're watching him focus on shaping institutions, bringing about institutional change, getting all the DEI out, the progressive stuff out, woke stuff out, focusing on the Smithsonian, focusing on the Kennedy Center, focusing on higher education. He very clearly understands that as the institutions go, so goes the country. I think you're going to really love this podcast today. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
We are so excited you guys joined us again this week. Lots to talk about. I'm glad we're living in a time that there is lots to talk about every week because so much is happening. And from our perspective, so much good stuff is happening. We highlighted some of those massive wins in terms of religious liberty and free speech and some of the moral sanity. And I think one thing that would be great just to highlight as well is the ongoing insanity of the left. You know, the latest thing that they're screaming about is the help that came to our nation's capital to actually restore decency and order and to create a safe environment where Americans could actually go to the Capitol and enjoy themselves and eat outside and not have to worry about, all kinds of craziness happening. We saw a lot of that during the lockdowns and some of the rioting that happened where people were simply out. I remember watching one video where somebody came up, you and your family sitting out at a nice Washington restaurant eating dinner and people getting in your face and, challenging you to say this, declare this, stand for our cause, and threatening you. And this was what was happening in Washington, D.C., and now Trump again is leading and bringing in reinforcements and restoring order and arresting a whole lot of criminals who shouldn't be on the streets. And we still have pushback from the left, which is just crazy to me. But I think this issue of law and order is going to be a massive winning point. Whoever lands on the side of law and order is going to be a candidate that's going to be very, very popular. Because, when we saw what was going on in the streets of Chicago a few years back, I had to think, would I really want to take my wife out for dinner in Chicago in this particular climate? And the answer is no. So I think, people get it. Like if you want to have a thriving downtown, if you want businesses to come there, if you want people to come to your city, like a bare minimum is you have to respect the rule of law. People have to obey the law. There's got to be order. So
yeah, I think Trump also has a strategy because right now the Democrats have been reduced to completely reactionary. Everything reactionary. Doesn't matter. Trump does A, they by nature have to respond negatively to whatever it is.
It's like there's no commonsensical common ground. Like, hey, we all like vitamin C. No, if you like vitamin C.
It's interesting psychology because Trump is leading very strongly and people recognize that, in general, you want your leaders to be strong, even if you don't 100% agree with them. And I think psychologically, Trump understands that. And Democrats have to respond strongly to whatever he's doing, and they react by going the opposite direction. But I think, by next midterm, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think what people are sensing is the Democrats have no direction. They have no vision. They have no clarity in what they're trying to do. Their clarity is anti-Trump, and that is generally not a winning message.
No.
So
we've seen that across the board. You can't run as a candidate against somebody or against an idea. I'm anti this. You can't be the anti candidate. And a lot of times the media, I'll just say this for Christian conservatives like myself, whenever I would present my platform or what I was, for, they would always cast me as anti. So if I was pro-life, then I would be anti-choice. And and they do that on purpose because you cannot be a reactionary and win. You have to have a compelling, exciting, robust vision of the future that people want to rally around. And just being against everything does not do that. But you're exactly right. That's where we're at. So there's nothing President Trump could do, no good thing President Trump could do that would cause the left to collapse and say, good point. Although did you see there's one break in the chink in the armor on the left? Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
did you see that?
I did see
she
her
actually said she would support Donald Trump getting a Nobel Peace Prize if he could broker this deal between Ukraine and Russia. And I just thought, what am I hearing?
I think she's playing politics.
Well, I'm sure she is.
She maybe feels under pressure, and she's like, hey, I don't know.
And my initial thought was, Hillary, who cares?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
do you think? And who gives you a vote on the Nobel Peace Prize, recipient? But anyway.
Yeah. But this is interesting because I remember a decade ago, maybe less, the conservatives were the one with no ideas. We're the one who's always anti-everything. We're the one who's like, we don't like this law, we don't like this progressive policy, yep. and the burden given to us is like, what is your compelling policy? What is your compelling visions? And before Trump came, the Republicans had nothing because the progressive worldview has a picture of utopia. And they were going 100 miles towards that. And we have no response. Well, the so-called, let's say the Republicans have no response to it because they have left the biblical worldview. They become this kind of secular blend of conservatism, but not really progressive. And they were just playing defense the whole time. You can't play defense the whole game and win. And that's what happened. They keep losing. And now Trump is coming. He's taking that playbook. He's just doing things left and right. And Democrats came and get a breather. They're just reacting left and right.
Well, because he's not fundamentally a politician. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Even Republicans adopted kind of that secular democratic liberalism where they didn't want to make any waves. We're all going to play together and we're all going to get along. And there was no compelling vision about America or about our
optimism. There's
foundational
like that.
Values.
Yep.
And I'll say this too, our young people are not going to rally around an ideology or a party that offers them no hope for the future. And that was what we were getting. Remember when all the manufacturing was leaving America? And you're probably not going to have it. I think it was President Obama. It was telling the next generation, you're probably not going to have it as good as a previous generation. And just this kind of a negative, nasty view of the future. And again, I mean, what young person wants to invest their lives in a country that's providing no hope for them? So Trump's coming in. He's speaking to the heart of the people. He's promoting American exceptionalism. America is a good place. America's story is a good story. America is a great nation. And these are all things that people are rallying around. So
yeah,
I love it. But again, I appreciate the fact that we're seeing a restoration in our urban areas. I think this too, when you do the obvious thing, you got a crime wave. People are being beaten on the streets, murdered, stores looted, and it's just a generally unsafe place. The citizens there who are trying to live and conduct their lives, they don't want to live like that, and they could care less at that point. The label after your name, just bring some order and safety to my city. And I was seeing where there were residents of Chicago who were saying, Mr. Trump, please come and send help to Chicago because we're living in a war zone here. But I think it's this too. I think it's pride. Because if I'm the mayor of Crown Point or whatever, and the government has to send help to get control of my city, then I view that as, all right, I'm not doing my job, or you're attacking my party. This is all political or whatever. So I think there's some of that prideful pushback, like, I haven't done a good job and I do need help that's going on as well. So it's a mess. It's all the worst things about politics, right? Labels, pride, power, ignoring problems, blame shifting. I mean, it is secular politics at its best, which is really the worst. So anyway, I thought this was an interesting article. I wanted to use it as a jumping off place for us today to start talking about what's happening. This was from the Daily Signal, a lady named Katrina Trinko. And she said, President Donald Trump may be leaving office in January 2029, but he's taking all the right steps to ensure his legacy lives much longer. And the point she's making is that Trump isn't just focused on legislation, but he's focused on institutions. Now, this is important because a pure politician would just be concerned about getting certain laws passed. But Trump understands what Andrew Breitbart, who was, again, one of the editors and political commentators, famous commentator, he said this, and it's become a very, very popular mantra. Politics is downstream of culture. First of all, let's talk about that. What is he saying? Politics downstream of culture.
Culture dictates worldview. Culture dictates philosophy. Culture dictates what's in, what's out, what's popular. Culture dictates what people values. And then what that trickles into is who you vote for.
Right, or what laws are passed.
What laws are passed, the consensus, the polling, right? So, just even the struggle for pro-life policies. We see in even red states, because it's downstream of 50 years of a coordinated campaign of an anti-life culture. Right?
So this gets back to unless you focus on the culture shaping institutions, you're going to keep having these political battles and fights over policy until you change the hearts of people. And as you pointed out, until you change their worldview, what they value, and their behaviors, their culture. And so to her point, she starts off by giving an example of the Kennedy Center and Trump's, releasing of all the board members and putting a new board in place. But she points out that Donald Trump will be hosting the Kennedy Center Honors Award ceremony later this year after he successfully changed the leadership of the beloved Washington, D.C. institution. And here I quote Donald Trump. Just last year, the Kennedy Center featured drag shows specifically targeting our youth. This will stop. The Kennedy Center is an American jewel and must reflect the brightest stars on its stage from all across our nation. So again, this is just strong moral leadership from our president. We're no longer going to allow drag shows that are aimed at attacking our children's morality or shaping their morality in a perverted way. We're no longer going to allow this to happen. How about this? This will stop, in all caps, and we're going to return that institution, which again is half funded by taxpayer dollars. So President Trump's saying you're not going to use this as a place to spew this kind of vile, perverted sexual ideology upon our nation any longer. But she also highlights the fact that Trump is holding the Smithsonian museums accountable. They also receive over half of their funding from taxpayers, and they also have gone way to the left. And they give some examples here. There are 21 museums that are must-sees for tourists, including students who come to Washington, D.C. every year. Just in 2024, I thought this was interesting, 17 million people visited the Smithsonian museums and the zoo. So these are, this is good. How many kids, get loaded up in a school bus or whatever, and they got some amazing teacher that's going to take them on this field trip, right? And they head off to Washington only to be indoctrinated with a bunch of progressive, leftist, divisive type of material. So, for instance, in the Smithsonian Museum, they had a exhibit about Cuba and all the Cubans who have fled to come to the United States. What was missing was the reason why they fled Cuba, which was a communist dictator by the name of Fidel Castro. They left that out. And they just talked about a bunch of Cubans coming to the U.S. Then we had the National Museum of African Art, which included a video where George Floyd is cast as a Jesus Christ-like figure. At the National Museum of American History, there's an exhibit called Rallying Against Racism that looks at the San Francisco Chinatown residents' experience during COVID-19 with, quote, Asian American hate. Now, what they did here, describing that exhibit, They said as COVID-19 spread across the United States in early 2020, San Francisco's Chinatown community was already shunned and even targeted by those who considered the disease, quote, the China virus. Now, this is a direct attack at Donald Trump's calling the virus the China virus because it came from China. We know now that that was not a racist comment. It was simply an accurate comment. That's where the virus came from. But this exhibit was twisted to make it look like the President of the United States was racist and created all this hate crime against Chinese people. So again, it's got a leftist slant to it. This one is especially interesting. The National Museum of African American History. There were 4 likenesses of Angela Davis, more than there were of Martin Luther King. One of them called Davis a scholar activist. Another had a poem that read, "The only thing you're guilty of is being a black woman to the core." And she points out that's not quite right. Davis purchased guns that were used in the Marin County Courthouse terrorist attack to kill a judge in 1970. She was on the FBI's most wanted list. She ran for vice president twice on the Communist Party ticket, and she's still an unrepentant communist, an ideology that has killed more than 100 million people. So here we have a leftist activist who was involved in all kinds of crimes, and she's a communist, and she's being featured as 4 times as somebody that our young people should emulate, which is ridiculous. And then here's the last exhibit I'll talk about in the article. An exhibit on Title IX and women's sports. And it featured Leah Thomas, the male swimmer who competed against females and won the NCAA swimming competition as a male pretending to be a woman. He is celebrated for what he did. And so all of this, again, is coming under the purview of the Trump administration. And so this is what happened. This was a letter that was written by Donald Trump to the administration. He says, quote, "As we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding, it is more important than ever that our national museums reflect the unity, progress, and enduring values that define the American story. This initiative aims to ensure alignment with the President's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, to remove divisive or partisan narratives, and to restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions." Again, this is awesome. I mean, this is exactly what I voted for. We have a president saying we're going to clean up the terrible narrative that's being put forth in the Smithsonian and other museums.
So let me give some analysis to this. So my perspective is this: if you are a low-level politician, you just do this all day long. Oh, the wind's blowing this way. Let me go and do this law. Oh, the wind's blowing this way. Let me go police this group of people.
Yep.
But what Barack Obama and some of these other people have done is they recognize, wait a second, why don't I do both? Why don't I control which way the wind's blowing, the way I want to go? So I'm going to start implementing cultural pressures. I'm going to align big media, Smithsonian's, higher education,
corporate America,
Silicon Valley. I'm going to align all those forces to push the policies that I want to pass for, so that not only am I controlling the policy, that I'm controlling the wind that directs the policies. And again, we talked about this earlier. This is why the conservatives has been playing catch up the whole time. Well, Donald Trump probably learned from Barack Obama, or he recognized what's going on, that if he just comes in, he enacts a bunch of his policy, but he never changes the source, the upstream cultural centers. His presidency is 4 years and then it's gone.
And whatever laws were passed get
reversed,
unpassed, or reversed, by the next administration.
So what he's doing is he's attacking traditional media. He sued CBS. He's suing Wall Street Journals. CBS really settled with him. I forgot whatever news channels. He's going after Harvard. Harvard has recently settled with him.
All the
he's going after
Palestinian, anti-Semitic protests and things going on.
Well, he's going after all the NCAA. So UPenn had to apologize for Leah Thomas and he's going after all Silicon Valley has a ton of them has come to Trump's side. He's embraced the whole, crypto bro stuff. He is like it, love him or hate him, what he's doing the same playbook. He's going after these institutional strongholds upstream of culture. He got rid of PBS. We're not funding PBS or.
Isn't it interesting that all of these leftist organs that immediately once we cut off funding,
the USAID,
taxpayer funding, now they're all going broken out of business, which should tell you again that this was a shell game that the left has geniusly conceived that was funding all of these cultural shaping institutions. So this isn't even the American people that were doing this. This was a cultural elite pushing, to your point, all these worldviews.
Stephen Colbert is getting fired. Probably some of these other late night people are going next. So again, you can see. I mean, this is all in his first year. What he is doing is his work to transform the strongholds of culture, because he recognized this principle right here. Now, what you and I want to talk about is what is the role of the institutional church, the local church in this process, of Christians in this process. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, great point. So I'm looking at, we're recognizing that these institutions shape ideas, and these ideas shape the people, and then the people shape the culture. Yeah. And what we should talk about is upstream from culture is the church of Jesus Christ. And I would say this too, the family as an institution that God created. So if your family gets broken down, you're not going to transmit values to the next generation. If your church does not having a prophetic voice and speaking to these issues or recognizing that this is part of what we're called to do is shape culture, then the church just stays in the four walls, the four box walls there, and we just pretend that all that matters is the next life. And that also, as you pointed out, I mean, first of all, we say the church, but all churches are not created equal. How long has it been since the church has really been in the game?
A relevant voice in shaping culture and ideas. You and I had that discussion. The last person I can think of who had that voice was Billy Graham. But like you said, Billy Graham was largely just the he was an evangelist.
Well, he was preaching the gospel to an America that, whether you were on the D or the R side, you shared similar values. That day is gone. And so his son, Franklin Graham, has a whole different approach. It had to be much more prophetic.
Yeah, and
confrontational because the culture, it's not the same culture.
Yeah.
Culture has shifted. So I think your point was brilliant. If one side of the government or one administration controls all the ideology on these culture-shaping institutions, then you're going to see a continual push toward that agenda and have more and more traction, more and more success as it goes on from year to year. So I think your point is well taken. There's a lot of young people now that are really hungry for truth and that are really looking for answers. And that, we were just talking with one of our young adult leaders who was saying he's never seen a group more hungry, that they show up with notebooks and Bibles and pens and they want to learn and they want to go deep and they're looking for answers, which I think is exciting. Let's take a look. I want to dive into this in the time that we have left. And do we have time to dive into
maybe
this?
we'll do that in our next podcast.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Yeah. We'll whet your appetite with that.
But just to kind of finish out your point, like this is the hunger of people for. So I am excited about these changes that Trump is instituting in these cultural centers. But I'll have to admit, I wish, as much as I like Trump and I appreciate what he's doing, there is a part of me that is wishing that the true followers of Jesus Christ, I'm not saying I don't want to speak to Trump's faith, but that there is a biblical center, theological perspective to shape these culture. Now, whatever Trump in his heart, I think he's doing a lot of good things, but I don't know what his theology, and sometimes I feel I don't know if it's flowing from a strictly biblical perspective. But you and I both understand that Western civilization is founded on these institutional principle pillars of the biblical values.
Yes.
And these biblical values should be once again reshaped in institutional centers like Smithsonian and Harvard and whatnot. And maybe that's why Trump is doing it. I don't know. There's some good people in his administration. Maybe that's who's doing it. But part of me is like, that's really the roles of the followers of Jesus Christ, to go back and reestablishing these pillars, because like you said, family, faith, these are the things that's going to really prosper the nation in the long run.
Well, and in a future podcast, we want to talk about this crazy alignment on the left between, and it doesn't make any sense. You got fundamentalist, radical, pro-Islam, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, destroy the West people who are aligned with largely atheistic, secular, leftist elites, and there's really, it's weird because the one thing that they share in common is a hatred for the West. And if you drill down, when you say hatred for the West, it's really a hatred for Christianity, because these ideas come from the Bible. And I think that's where pastors have largely failed, is we have, and maybe we have not been taught this in seminaries and other places, but we have not been able to connect the dots between the actual Word of God and these institutions that flow from the Word of God. And if you can't make that connection and you can't make that case in front of your people, then we can talk about, Western culture, whatever, but we don't have an appreciation for the uniqueness of these ideas and how these ideas have shaped the world in which we live. And that again is where the church has got to get our game face on and get back in the game and start talking about these issues.
Because we understand, you and I understand, we talked about this before, that Western exceptionalism or American exceptionalism, how do you say that?
Exceptionalism,
really came from the scriptures. The scripture lay out the foundation that leads to the greatest prospering of life. We've seen it over and over again. We see it in development, medicine, university, technology, democracy, republic, freedom, life, the value of life, all came from the scriptures. Now, when the institutional churches are not preaching that, pastors not preaching it, we have someone like Donald Trump, who I don't know if someone preached that to him. He's like, hey, American exceptionalism. He's started putting these policies in place. And I'm kind of like, I'm glad he's doing it, but
right.
Is he the right person to do that? And I don't think I'm glad he's doing that.
Well,
but
I love the prophetic authority with which he speaks on some of these issues. We are promoting drag queen story hours for kids. This will stop. I mean, this will stop. Why? Because this is wrong. Because this is evil. We haven't heard a president speak with that kind of straightforward moral authority. But to your point, where are the prophetic voices, that are, and again, sometimes I'll say this about the local church. Sometimes as a local church pastor, you're like, well, I don't have the authority to remove the Kennedy board of directors. Right. I don't have the authority to come out and say that. I don't have that platform. But I think we have to be faithful with our own platform. I mean, this certainly needs to be coming out of my mouth on Sunday morning with the sheep that call Living Stones home. But I also will say this, I do feel like because there have been some prophetic voices, and because there's been a challenge to pastors to get in the game, and because there's been a lot of people speaking about why this is not, quote, political speech, it's biblical speech, and why these issues are not, political issues, they're moral issues, and why the church should be speaking out, I do feel like there is an awakening among pastors, and you're hearing more and more pastors taking a more, bold approach. So I don't want to, just spank the church and say, shame on all you pastors out there, because there is a good core group of godly folks that are raising their voices. And a lot of them are just saying, hey, I want to do more. I want to be more engaged, but I don't know how. I remember when I first got involved, it was because of Tony Perkins and the Family Research Council. And he was challenging pastors to get involved. And I'm sitting out there going, yes, but I've never done this before. Yeah. Like, there's no playbook for me. I don't know what to do. And so I just kind of jumped in and started trying to follow the Holy Spirit and do something. So I think it's a lot of factors, but I'm confident, and I just, maybe we can use this as a plug as we're closing here. But I'm very, very excited about the Flashpoint gathering. Pretty soon we'll be able to announce the speakers for that night. I've seen 3 or 4 of them that they're not confirmed yet, but they're all men who have a voice for righteousness in the public arena, and who are working to equip the church to be more engaged, to lead more in their spheres of influence. And so, that's going to be the first week of October, Thursday and Friday. And we want to encourage you too on this podcast, if you're listening and you're in this region, to go ahead and register for those events, because it's filling up fast. I think we're approaching the 700 mark. We have room for about 1,100 in our facility, and we really haven't promoted it yet among our people. So I would encourage you to go to the Flashpoint website and get registered for that event. But to your point, I mean, the church has to lead the way. Yeah. We've got to see that our job is to train and equip the next generation, and we've got to help connect the dots between what happens here in church and what happens out there in the world as well, in marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I think this is a really, really good point today. If we're just summarizing, what's the point of this podcast? It's you have to shape the institutions that shape the culture. Otherwise, you're just involved in political skirmishes every year that seem to have, we pass a certain amendment that, that prohibits the using of federal dollars to support abortions overseas, the Hyde Amendment, and then the next administration comes in and they undo the Hyde Amendment. And then the next pro-life administration comes in and they pass the Hyde Amendment. And, it's just like, back and forth like a yo-yo. All of that will continue to happen until we have a fundamental shift in our culture, and that's really only happens through revivals and spiritual awakening. But there's practical aspects to that as well. Like we need to do something. I appreciate all of our Dutchies watching here, because I'll tell you one thing about the Dutch community. They have always valued Christian education, and their families have made incredible sacrifices to make sure that happens. And so I applaud the different Christian schools and that are in the area. I applaud homeschooling folks. I applaud Christians who are in the public schools trying to make a difference. But obviously education is huge in shaping the views of the next generation. And this is a good segue. We're going to get into that in depth. A disturbing survey came out about what's going on in the minds and hearts of our college young people today, and we're gonna touch on that in our next podcast. So, any final comments from yourself?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I think, like you said earlier, a optimistic perspective in the future is so key in leadership, especially for the next generation. Yep. And for so long, conservatives did not have that. The progressive did. They have a Marxist utopian. Donald Trump has came in and has really talked about, the golden age of America. I mean, talk about being blatant and establishing an optimistic view, because he recognized what we all recognize as hope is so important.
Yes.
Do we Christians have hope, or are we waiting for everything to burn? Yeah. And Christ, I know I'm talking about eschatology is a hot topic, but again, like that eschatology, that view from a Christian perspective does matter in our ability to speak to the future and to lead for the future and to lead the next generation to the future. And I don't even want to get into the eschatology part of all that. I'm just saying, without hope to lead the next future, man, it is hard to lead. It is hard to inspire the next generation. Absolutely. If you're just saying, hey, you know what, everything's going to get darker and darker. And I personally don't believe that. Again, I'm not representing living stones. I personally don't believe in that. But again, that's why it's working. That's why, because there is hope for the future. And I don't think I'm being delusional. I'm not trying to make something up. But man, if I want to lead my kids, I'm going to give them hope.
Absolutely. And you want to work toward, having cities that you could let your kids go play in or ride their bikes and not have to worry about.
Start businesses, start schools, start run for office, things can get better. Things will get better. We're not letting everyone take over, evil run rampant. No. We have been given all authority over heaven and earth, to make disciples of all nations. Amen. Not just make disciples and having to say the name of Jesus and convert, but for them to go impact cultures.
Right. That is the Great Commission, and that's what it involves, discipling nations. So we're starting to come back to that, get an idea what that looks like, and then now it's the hard work of rolling up your sleeves, and this is why it takes multiple generations. It takes a long-term view, because these things don't change overnight. But you got to have a vision that is accomplishable, and you got to do it for the glory of God, and you got to keep your hand to the plow. And in the end, truth always wins. That's my hope. Truth always wins. And so, thank you guys again for watching. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us a text or a comment. We so appreciate. Sometimes all we hear is from the squeaky wheels, but we'd love to hear, and negative squeaky wheels. We'd love to hear from you all who are enjoying this podcast every week. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday.